just to get a perspective, how many of neurosurgeons are there in this meeting? Can we have, so the bulk of them are, and how many of you do transforaminal blocks? So very limited. And how many of you do transforaminal discectomies? So practically 2 or 3. So I think this lecture would help you not just to quickly learn transforaminal blocks, but also sort of help you to graduate towards transforaminal discectomies also if you wish to. So what I've done today is brought in a mixture of both. Now, transforaminal epidural steroids, what you do is the drug is injected through the foraminal root for blocking the nerve roots, along with injecting epidural steroids. And the primary advantage is that the drug is being deposited close to the source of pain. Now, what I would like to emphasize here is, as clinicians, I must tell you, making a diagnosis is the most important for all of us, because look, as far as surgery or developing surgical skill is concerned, it is not that difficult. Once, even say at the resident level or the junior most level, if your consultant tells you that go do L5S1 discectomy, most of us would be able to perform. But clinching the diagnosis that in a particular patient, whether the pain is discogenic, facetal, whether there is radicular component or not, so identifying the source of pain is most important, and this is where transforaminal blocks or these blocks come into play as well. So not just they are therapeutic, they are also of great diagnostic value to us. So what are the indications? Obviously radicular pain, which is secondary to disc prolapse. This is the bulk or bread and butter that we see, and so transforaminal blocks help in that. For lateral foraminal stenosis, post-laminectomy syndrome with radiculitis. Now this again, I must tell you that I myself make a lot mistakes a lot of time. When I do a procedure and the patient is coming back to me with back pain, I just keep on giving him drugs or physio, etc., etc., rather than pinpointing that there could still be a problem there which I haven't identified and resolved. So post-laminectomy syndrome, failed back syndrome, this is becoming more and more common. Again, not just because of bad procedure, but a bad diagnosis as well. So this is very important. Post-traumatic or post-herpetic radicular pain, and then scoli. After I used more of blocks, my surgical rate for scoliosis has really come down, especially degenerative scoliosis. We see degen scoli and we attack the patient, not required, because the patient is an adapted patient. You just need to resolve the pain. So degen scoli, don't rush in for surgery, try blocks first. So quickly to point on the radiology of the lumbar foramen, I've just rotated, each one of my films will be rotated so that you get a perspective of how the patient is lying, the radiology when the patient is lying, that is what is important. So these are oval foramen, the height is 1.5 to 2.5 centimeter, but the important thing is that there is progressive widening of the foramen caudally. This is to our advantage because bulk of our cases is L3 downwards. So this is really good for us. You have more space. Now again, if you look at the MRI, this is another important aspect, that the nerve root is in the superior part of the foramen, and you have a lot of part inferiorly which is free. And when you have a disc prolapse, it is the traversing root which is mostly is the source of pain. Now, another important aspect that we should be aware is the Camben's triangle, or the safe zone for approaching the foramen. So, not going into the detail, this is the Camben's triangle, and most of my blocks would go in here rather than in the upper area. I'll give you the exceptions as well. So the exception is for L5-S1 route, and the reason is that the ganglion moves towards the spinal canal and a little inferior towards L5-S1. So you can use this area pretty well for L5-S1, though if you're comfortable using the 𝐒𝐻𝐵𝐻 triangle also, there's no issue. So this is the perspective you will have when the patient is there. Now coming to the techniques, I'll tell you as neurosurgeons, it is not a steep learning curve. You can go back and start doing blocks right away. It's just that you need to have the radiological anatomy in your head. Now there are two approaches that I use. The first is, I've coined these terms myself for my convenience, the parasagittal approach, which is just besides the midline. Mostly I'll do this for L5-S1 in view of the bony restriction of the lateral approach. And I do a far lateral approach, which is my personal preference, which is from the side. And the reason I do it is, for L5-S1, when I do endoscopic discectomies, I don't do a transforaminal discectomy because of the height of the iliac crest. What I do is an endoscopic interlaminar discectomy, where I don't need to drill the L5 lamina at all. There's quite a lot of space, and with a 6mm or a 7mm endoscope, I can very well remove the disc. But higher up, when I do transforaminal discectomies, I use this far lateral approach so that I can sort of negotiate the needle and my scope, which I'll just tell you in detail. Now, what happens where the needle tip should be when you're injecting the drug? There are three positions: subpedicular, which is one of the most commonly used, but I go retroneural or infraneural, so that is where I prefer personally. Now, as I've told you, I use parasag approach for L5-S1 level, though it can be used for any level. Coming to the technique, the patient is in prone position and you confirm the level using C-arm. So first do a lateral AP and then get a Scotty dog view. Now I think Scotty dog view, most of the neurosurgeons may not be aware. It's an oblique view where you just tilt the receiving arm towards the side wherein you want to put, and when you rotate, then this is the eye of the pedicle or the superior articular process. This is the body of the lamina. Here is the foramen, and then the nose is the transverse process. So it's just an oblique view and that gives you the best view for the facet and sort of very neat view for the transforaminal injection as well. So once you have identified the transforaminal window, just use a 26 gauge needle and have a gentle bend, and then you pass under fluoroscopic guidance. So you can sort of use either this safe triangle, which is supraneural, but I avoid it, and I'll in the course of this lecture I'll sort of tell you why. So this is where the needle gets located. This is sort of a partial oblique view, but a subpedicular position. Now the reason why I use infraneural is that the segmental vessel sort of enters above the root or the ganglia in the foramen. So it's not that if you do not have the nerve there, there's no vascular structure. So there is a vascular structure, and this area is sort of neat and clean, so I would rather prefer here. So this is the 𝐒𝐻𝐵𝐻 triangle, and I generally prefer injecting the drug there. So this is the parasag L5-S1 and the position of the needle. So again, to show you the subpedicular, and once you have reached the subpedicular or the infraneural level, you inject the dye, and once you have confirmed that you are in the right position, you can give the drug. But coming to the next approach, or the lateral approach, again I'll assure you that it's a very easy procedure to do, and I hope if we have cases I'll be demonstrating this approach. I've got the needles also, which is the lateral or far lateral approach. The beauty about it is sort of you can just push the needle a little lower and the sort of needle goes into the disc, and you can do a transforaminal discectomy as well. So quickly to show you, you get a AP view. Yes, I'll just take 2 minutes. So AP view. Now please, if there is one take-home message for the beginners, it is this line: no parallax. So you adjust your 𝐒𝐮 in a fashion that you have no parallax. This is perhaps one of the most important things which I can teach you right now. So here, if you see, this is just a marking, no parallax. Then go in for a lateral view. And how do you confirm the lateral view? Here, there's a beautiful article by Roten et al. You can read. How much lateral you can go. So the hump of the joints for L4-5, and above that just the tip of the spinous process. So confirm on lateral X-ray, and thereafter you push the needle in. Basically, this, just to show a quick case, this patient was operated. You can see a midline scar here about 15 years back, again coming with pain, and through the lateral part we pushed in the needle here. Now again, another learning tool is this end plate is one of the best places to put the drug, and if you push the needle a little lower down, you are into the disc. You can go ahead and do a discography. You can do a transforaminal block. So there's a lot of versatile things that you can do. Here I've just shown how I've pushed in the needle into the disc, and you can do the discography. I'll quickly share the drugs that we use. You can use bupivacaine, and for steroids I personally prefer non-particulate dexamethasone, and you can use dye. Why dexamethasone? Non-particulate. Really no major serious adverse events have been reported till date. As compared to particulate, there are cases of spinal cord infarcts. Less than 4 milligrams, and now we have studies that there is no added advantage putting in more drugs, and there is decreased side effect when the dosage is decreased. There are a host of complications which one has to be aware of. It's not that just putting a needle does not carry complications, so you should be aware about those. Just one paper, meta-analysis, radicular pain secondary to disc, level 1 evidence of benefit at 3 and 6 months. So this is one of the most benchmark results you can have, level 1 evidence. Pain secondary to central canal stenosis, level 4 evidence. Failed back syndrome, level 4. Secondary to lateral recess, level 5 evidence. Try to use a blunt needle and an infraneural approach. So take home message, it's a very, very, very important technique in one's kitty. You should have it so that not only for diagnostic but also therapeutic purposes. Best for radicular pain secondary to disc prolapse. The learning curve, I can assure you, is not steep. It has a range of complications, so due diligence for safety is required. For the neurosurgeons, I would like to invite all of you for a live operative MIS surgical course at Jabalpur under the aegis of NSSA from 16th to 18th of November. Many thanks.